All right, Liz. So let's take a look at your essay. Before I get started, I just want to let you know that obviously I'm not doing anything with Emily formatting, or anything right now. But what I did do is I put this to be double spaced just so it's a little bit easier to go through. So, starting off with your introduction, I'm just gonna let you know right away this is really short. I know you've got one, two, three, four not paragraphs, sentences. Um, but if you see how short the introduction is compared to your body paragraphs, it is a little bit concerning because your purpose with the introduction is to introduce the topic and to do it where you're going from a broad to a very specific. But I want to talk about your introduction in conjunction with this first paragraph because I think it's got some of the same things. So you start right away without a hook or really an introduction to introduce the topic. You start off right with your thesis. So if you recall back when I gave you the packets on the introductions and whatnot, my main concern was starting your paper in particular ways, but more importantly, looking at ways that you shouldn't start the paper. And when your question and your topic is whether or not mercy killings are ethical, that is your thesis. Whatever your position is on mercy killing, that is your thesis. And your thesis does not start a paper. Your thesis needs to be at the end right here. So this is where you should have it say mercy killings are not ethical. And for this kind of paper, I'm okay with it being an open thesis like that, but typically if you do a closed thesis, that would be mercy killings are not ethical because of blank and blank. So with that in mind, the fact that you're saying they're not ethical, your paper is not following that so far. So you see right here, if the person is truly that bad, then they will be watched by doctors or nurses, and if needed, be pulled off life support. This should be need instead of needed. So we've got a verb form that's incorrect here, and then you have this random capitalization. And because mercy killing is not a proper noun, this should not be capitalized. But you start with this mercy killings not being ethical and equating it to murder. But some definitions may say that pulling someone off of life support is the same thing. So I want you to consider that. And then when we transition here, even though your third body paragraph is supposed to be the one that is dealing with your opposition, you included it here. So I'm not going to be super picky with that right now, but there is another concern that I want to talk about. And the problem is you don't really refute the position. So Dr. Jack Kevorkian, all this way down to here, are pretty decent examples, really. So this is true. People were suffering and did not want to live. They could go to him and he would help them end their life. So there you're addressing the perspective as helping patients, but then other people see it as an act of murder. And you're lacking the analysis because you say right here at the end, mercy killings are murder except for doing it out of love. So there's two main things here is you kind of need to define what doing it out of love is, because some could argue that that's what Kevorkian is doing, and I'm not going to worry too much on it. But the problem is the continuity of your essay. It's not flowing super great at this point because you say it's not ethical except if it's done out of love or if someone's pulled off life support, but you still haven't explained or given us enough analysis as to why it is murder. You're just saying, well, I don't think it's a mercy killing. I don't think it's fair. I think it's just straight up murder. But you're not explaining why. So at this point, if this is the topic you need to take, it needs to be hit by now already. You have some decent examples that you could go with, but you definitely need to be rewording this and doing this differently here. Okay, so moving on into your essay, I think this paragraph actually does a lot better job at using some evidence with some analysis. I think the thing you can improve on would be your word choice here. So let me explain all this to you. So, let me talk about the awkward things, and then I will tell you what I really like. And it'll kind of be in between. So, people started to fight against mercy killings. This is a vague word. And just to say, people started to fight against mercy killings, I think you need to change this a little bit, because saying things like, people started to do this, or it's just not super effective in academic writing. And especially with what you could say is something about how a community or various laws fight against mercy killings and look and view it as murder. Something where you can kind of take that legal standpoint or the perspective of different people who view it, because that makes it a better topic sentence than just saying something along the lines of people started to fight against whatever. Because this is actually a pretty common way that people use to start as a topic sentence for their essays. So this introduction is real good evidence that you're doing. What I would say is this becomes a little bit awkward with your word choice here. Age 73 and had Alzheimer's and osteoporosis. This should be aged with a D. And this is just a little bit awkward because we're not, I know you're talking about Emily, but because of perhaps a lack of a comma, it's just a little bit awkward, and sometimes people may mistake it back to Roswell Gilbert. So this is a good use of quotes and giving background to the story. And then this is actually really funny. The situation's not funny, but this sentence right here, the jury saw no mercy except for himself. This is actually a really, really good sentence. The problem is it doesn't make sense here, because when you say the jury saw no mercy except for himself, that kind of implies he had some mercy, but he was still sentenced to 25 years with no chance of being on parole. But I want to say your analysis and the part where your voice as a writer comes out is really good here. The jury saw no mercy except for himself. And even though that doesn't make sense, and that in conjunction with it was pretty much his death sentence, those are good tidbits to put in your essay to make it a lot better. Unfortunately, this one just doesn't quite work in the context of what you're doing. And then right here, this is where we see some of the analysis a little bit more. Even though he claimed to love his wife, there was consequences for his act of murder that he had to pay. So this is all pretty good, but I think you're still kind of at the skin and bones so far. So aside from the awkward wordings, you have some real good writing styles that you're incorporating in different ways, even though it doesn't quite make sense in one of the instances. But I think you need to add a little bit more instance here, because what you're missing is this whole thing back to your topic sentence and how I told you could reword it. Talk a little bit more about the amount of people who see it as murder, and that's how it upholds in the court system. And talk about that a little bit more, because right here you're talking about how mercy killings are murder. Well, here you go. You have an example of a mercy killing that is seen as a murder, so you need to add a little bit more about why that is murder in this case, and then your paragraph becomes a lot better. Because overall, aside from the word choice, in this awkward double spacing right here, you just need a better topic sentence and keep incorporating your writing styles like this. Because I will say what I'm seeing so far is you have some few shining moments where your writer's voice is coming out, but you need to keep that up, because you're a little bit, when it comes to the evidence, it's a little bit harder, and you get these glimmering notices of some really good writing, but it's not always in here. Okay, real quick before I move on to the next portion, because I'm already at 9.5 minutes. Back to the statement. So I forgot this is from the Time article, and it's not quoted exactly. Still would be a good incorporation, but the way that you have it worded isn't quite how it should be in the essay. But yes, so moving on. This is a good transition right here. Gilbert said, "You always hurt the people that you love," and transitioning from his story into that as a topic sentence is really good. However, even though this topic sentence is good, I have some concerns with this paragraph again. So let's look at this sentence right here. He thought that because it was a mercy killing, he would not have to serve time in prison. Nowhere in the article, correct me if I'm wrong, but after I just checked it, I don't believe there's anywhere in here that says, oh, I would have avoided prison. But again, we have a little bit of the analysis going on here. Little did he know that mercy killing face charges just like a normal murder case. So you have the analysis part where you're using some examples and saying, well, what you look at here is that legality, it is murder. So I think if you extend your examples of this being murder more, you can better help out your case of you saying mercy killing is not ethical. But moving on, your a mice and men example is good. But the problem is it's a little hypothetical. Asking questions like, but couldn't he have just protected him? Those sorts of questions you should not be asking. You need to be answering those questions. And that's a big thing I'm seeing with these essays so far, are a lot of people in the body paragraphs being like, well, what about this? What about this? You need to answer it. And especially if we look at this right here, you have so much evidence in the novel that could support this claim that he doesn't want to deal with him or take care of him. And even though I don't personally think or have that perspective of the book, I can see in the book examples you can use to support this claim. Because the problem here is this just says, well, he wanted to do this, but you don't have the evidence to back that up here. And this would be the logical reasoning. So my question to you is why? And you're saying, well, couldn't he have just protected him? But you need the evidence to say that this is the reason for it. And looking at some of the grammar things, because I've been a little bit shoddy on it, you have a lot of contractions that you should not be using. You started a word with a but, which you should not be doing. And there was some capitalization things, and then spacing looks okay. But all right, now on to your conclusion, then we will wrap this up. All right, so in conclusion, mercy killings are not ethical. So your conclusion, restating the thesis, is good. And then, of course, you want to leave your readers with some thought. So I think this is okay. Do you want a murder running around? Oh, well, let me start here. You have the wrong word here. I think you mean murderer. So you need an extra ER here. So you don't have the spelling correct here. And questions like, do you want a murderer running around because he claimed to be a mercy killer? Do you want to be the next victim? I think that is pretty powerful. But the problem is you don't have the substance to back it up. You don't really have any evidence. And I know there's article in Kevorkian's I know there is evidence in Kevorkian's article, in the Time article, where they talk about the legality and what this could turn into. The problem is I'm seeing a lot of this of, well, this is just going to happen if we allow this to be legalized. But there is no evidence to back that up. And that is the key thing with the argumentative essay is you need to be able to back this up with evidence. So it's fine that you're repeating here again, mercy killings are just as much illegal as murder. But again, you're talking about the ethics of it and whether or not it should be legal or legal. And that's part of it, but you should really be wrapping it up in a way of it should be illegal because it's seen as murder, and just explain why it is seen as murder. This is the thing you need to focus on more. So overall, there's a few grammar things I've talked to you about. The opposition needs to be better. Your best paragraph is your third one, where you start to do a little bit more of evidence with analysis. But again, the problem is, even though you've got some decent transitions and you have some decent examples here, you're not taking enough time to explain it. So hopefully as you move forward, you can see the points that were really good and some parts that you especially need to work on for your next paper. And hopefully this will make it clear and you can improve it the next time around by adding that analysis.